Hello, welcome to another edition of What's Cooking. I'm Tim Paroli. Today we're going to show you a Friday favorite. Years ago in many restaurants and diners, people would know what would be on the lunch menu just by the day of the week. And the day of the week that we have picked out to give you as our Friday favorite is Friday. And it's going to be a fried fish luncheon, and it can also be served as dinner. To serve with the fried fish that we have selected today, we're going to also prepare stewed tomatoes and baked macaroni and cheese. Now, because of the time limit of each item that we have on the menu and the difference in the cooking times, I'm going to begin by cooking the elbow macaroni. So as we began today, we had the water started. The water is already boiling, as you have noted, and we're going to add some salt to that. And then to the boiling salted water, we are going to add about 2 cups of elbow macaroni. Now, what we're doing with this is I'm going to prepare this for 4 to 6 portions. We'll keep it around there. If your family is a large, you eat a lot, big eaters, then you'll figure this to cover 4 of you. If not, then you can figure 5 to 6, depending upon the appetite that your family has. All right, so now that that is going, we're going to watch that till it boils. I'll be stirring it off and on from time to time within the next 10 to 15 minutes or until it is done, whichever happens to come up first. While that's cooking, we're going to prepare for you a cheese sauce. So I want to show you the ingredients for the cheese sauce on the board, and then I will point out the method of preparation. The cheese sauce that I'm showing you today is a very basic and simple cheese sauce. The ingredients are as follows: some butter. The large T is a tablespoon, so that's 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of flour, 1 tablespoon of dry mustard, a 1/4 tablespoon of salt, pepper. I don't have an amount because that's up to you. A cup of milk, a cup of shredded cheese. I'm using shredded American processed cheese. Some hot sauce. The reason there's no figure in front of this is because you may want to use more or less. And 4 to 6 ounces of elbow macaroni. That we already have cooking. That's approximately 2 cups. Now, I'm going to prepare this sauce with a thickener that is called a roux, and that is the reason we have equal amounts of flour and fat. And whenever we're going to cook a sauce that has this flour and fat mixture in it, and milk also, 3 things that burn very easily, we want to use a thick pot. Now, I'm using an aluminum pot today, and it is a very thick-walled pot, and that's going to help the small flame. The pot will disperse the heat evenly through the bottom and sides of the pot and lessen the chance of scorching or burning. So on the fire goes the pot. I'll be using a whip today to mix that. And the 2 ingredients that begin our sauce are the butter and the flour. Now, we use equal amounts of that, so I'm going to let that butter melt down, and then I want you to take a look at this as I add the flour to it, because even though you may have the amounts measured out or weighed out and figure that they're going to be right, you never know exactly how that flour is going to react, because the humidity of the day and the temperature and where it's kept are all going to affect how much flour you're going to need to that same amount of butter. All right, I'm giving those noodles a stir. And if we can get a shot into this little pot here, you can see that that butter is beginning to melt. And I'm going to turn that up just a little bit. Now that is melting very nicely. I'm going to break that up a little bit with the whip so that it goes a little quicker. And I'll stir that around. The reason I'm going to move this all over is even though we do have this type of pot, I still want to make sure that the butter is moved all around, and that's going to move the heat all over the bottom of the pan. Okay, now I'm going to add the flour. So this you want to pay close attention to. When you have the hot fat, again, that can be butter or oil, I'm going to add an equal amount of flour, but I'm not going to dump all of it in at once. I'm going to reserve just a little bit and just make sure that that roux is going to look the way I want it. Okay, I can see that that's still nice and thin, so I'm going to put the rest in. And now we want to stir this around, and I want to get all the sides and into this corner and into that corner. I want to get it real good, and then I'm going to move that all around. Make sure we have any lumps that may have come into that from mixing it, we're going to whip them right out of it. And I'm going to let this cook for a few minutes, just until we have that pasty taste of raw flour cooked out of it. And again, as we have told you in previous programs, when you cook this, you will notice that the smell of the roux, now that it is called, will change. It will pick up a characteristic toast type of an odor to it. Now this is going to be a light sauce. It's going to be a cheese sauce. It begins with a cream sauce. They're all light in color, so we don't want this roux to pick up any color either. So we're going to take this and continue moving it along the bottom of the pan so that it doesn't burn and so it doesn't scorch or brown. Now you can take a look at that and you'll see that that is really bubbling along very nicely. We can see how good that, if I take that out and get it out of your way, you can see how that's really just bubbling along nicely. And because of that thick pot, it's not going to burn. You can see that as I move it along, it's not sticking anywhere and everything seems to be going along nice. Now depending upon how long you cook this roux and how much you do it, the heat that it takes is going to affect its thickening power. So we want to make sure that we don't brown it, because if we do brown it, two things are going to happen. The first is that it's going to add a color to the sauce. Maybe for us, a light sauce, it's going to be an undesirable brown color. And the second thing is that this roux is not going to be as strong as it would be if it was a light colored one. So now I'm going to add the milk to it, and I'm going to add the milk all at once. So I want you to take and pay close attention to that, because when I add this to it, we don't want it to be dribbled in, because that's how we get our lumps. And I'm going to stir that all around, small circles, so that I can whip that in there. And now I can lower our fire just a little bit as I continue stirring that. And I go all around the sides and the bottom of the pot, making sure that we have that roux thoroughly blended. Okay, so now what we have here is a cream sauce. So it is a very basic sauce that we have just made that we're going to use as our cheese sauce. So now I'm going to let that come up to the boil, and when it does, we will know exactly how thick it will be. And give these a stir. Whenever you're cooking pasta, we have told you before, but it never hurts to go over it, is that for every pound of pasta, you want a pint of boiling salted water, and that's what we have here. And you can see that the water is boiling and the noodles have not stuck, because when we added them to that boiling water, we gave them a stir, and that keeps them from sticking. And now they appear to be done. And the best way to find out if these things are done is to taste them. We want these cooked al dente. That's Italian for to the bite, which means we want them to have the tenderness of a cooked pasta, but we don't want them to be mushy. Now I'm stirring the sauce, and you can see that the sauce in just a moment or two has thickened up. And that will be boiling in a moment. Okay, this one is boiling. I can turn our first one down, which has that. And now we're going to remove that from the fire and be sure that we blend this really well. And now we will add our cheese. As I said, I'm using a shredded American cheese. That goes in. And we're going to add a little bit of the dry mustard to that. Dry mustard is going to bring out the flavor of the cheese. It's also going to make that a little bit hot. So when you're adding your salt and pepper to it, you have to know the type of cheese you're using. If it's a very salty cheese, you're not going to want too much salt. So this one's going to get a little bit of a shake in it from me. I use too much salt most of the time, so I'm trying to cut down on that a little bit. Mixing that up, and I'm going to crack a little pepper in there. And that gets mixed around. And now we have our cheese sauce ready. We're just going to bring that back to the boil one more time to make sure that that will not separate, or the sauce will not thin out. And we'll know that that's just how thick it's going to get. It won't get any thicker than that after it is boiled. Now that the noodles are ready, there, the sauce is boiled nicely, we are going to add those noodles in here right to this. And I'm going to take them out of the water and put them right in our cheese sauce. Okay, I'm just draining the noodles, lifting them right out, draining them, and there they go right into that sauce. You can see that that sauce is holding them up because of the thickness of the sauce. Get the last of our noodles out of the way here. We'll be in good shape. And then I'm going to move this pot down over my cutting board where I'm going to mix them together. I'm going to fold those ingredients together, and then we're going to have the noodles mixed in with the cheese sauce. All I have to do is mix these and just fold them over. Just fold the sauce over top of the noodles and stir it around the bottom. Make sure they all get to the bottom of the pot and they all get coated with the sauce so they look really nice. Now if you get a look at that, you'll see just how they look before we put them in the oven. Again, these noodles are al dente, which means they're only cooked to the bite. You can see how the sauce has covered each one of them, and you can see that the sauce is very smooth at this point and has a very nice shine to it. That's a sign of a good sauce that has been thickened properly, and they're the kind of things that we look for. Now before I bake this off, I'm going to take a spoon and just take a little taste of the sauce. I like mine nice and mild. I like the cheese flavor to come through. I'm not particularly fond of baked macaroni that blows my ears off, so that's pretty good for me, nice and mild. Now I'm going to take that and put that into a shallow pie pan or a baked pan or a casserole, whatever you happen to like your baked macaroni in. We all have our favorite kind of pan. I like a shallow pan for it because it seems when I serve it, everybody wants the crispy part on top. Okay, so that goes in there, and I'm going to flatten that out just a little bit. Put this under, and this is going to go into our oven. Now again, the type of oven that I'm going to use today is a convector oven. Again, this is the same as your oven at home, except that this particular oven has a fan in it, and you can hear the fan rumbling along here. I'm going to put this in, and it is going to be baked. We already know that this is cooked. We're going to bake this just until the top is brown, because we already know it has been brought to the boil. It's safe to eat. We just want to add some color to it, and that's how it gets its name, that it's baked macaroni. This is the process that gives it its name. Otherwise, it's just baked macaroni, it's just macaroni in a cheese sauce, and it doesn't have that appetizing gratiné or brown crust on the top of it. Now that we have that in, the product that takes the longest amount of time, the next item that we're going to do is a stewed tomato. And I'd like to show you the ingredients for the stewed tomato that I'm going to show you today. Again, this is a very basic stewed tomato, a very simple one to make, and it's usually good to start out with this one, taste it, see if you like it, and then you can add something that you feel it's missing. For me, a basic one like this, I like a little bit of garlic in mine, brown fresh garlic, but a lot of people have to acquire a taste for that. So try this one first and then see if it's missing a little kick for you. The first ingredient is 16 ounces or a 1 pound can of the canned peeled whole tomatoes. A third a cup of onion. We're going to cut that very small and give you a review on that as we do it. 2 tablespoons of green pepper, fresh green pepper. A tablespoon of sugar. That will be optional. I'm going to taste these tomatoes and see how they are, because tomatoes like this that are canned, sometimes sugar is already added to them and they're already sweet enough. I want to eat a vegetable, not a dessert, with my baked macaroni. So taste that first and see if you need the sugar that's on our list here. Salt is another thing you may not need. Taste it, and that will tell you whether you need that salt and the sugar that I have listed for you on the recipe. The 1/8 teaspoon of pepper can either be white or black pepper. That doesn't matter, because this is a dark red or a vegetable, so it's really not going to be of any consequence. This recipe that I've listed for you today calls for 1 cup of bread cubes. So you can take a couple of slices of fresh white bread, cut it into small cubes, and use that as the thickener. Or you can take, as I'm going to today, and I'm changing this recipe a little bit, we're going to add a little bit of cornstarch. And I'm going to show you how cornstarch is added to thicken a product like the stewed tomatoes. Very simple to begin with. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take these canned tomatoes. Now, the canned tomatoes, I know the weight because they're from the can. If you were going to use fresh tomatoes, you would take 3 whole large fresh tomatoes, peel them and dice them small. These are already cooked. I prefer these. It saves me a lot of time in the kitchen. And if I get a brand that I really like, they're going to be the same time after time, and that's going to give me a lot of consistency in the tomato product that I'm going to use in the kitchen. The other container here is the juice from that, and I'll show you how we are going to add that to it a little bit later on. Now the first thing is we're going to put a little bit of oil in here, because we're going to saute some onion and some pepper. So a little bit of oil goes in the pot, and now down to the cutting board for an onion. We've done onions many times, but we're going to do them over and over because it's an item that is always used in just about every kind of dish we prepare. The top and bottom comes off the onion. The little root button gets put aside. We split that root button in half. Now I'm only calling for 1/3 cup, so all I have to do is wrap the other half, keep that in the refrigerator after I peel it, and I've got peeled onion next time, and you don't have to go through this. But taking it from the top, that half of onion, that top peel will just come right off with no problem at all. Then I'm going to take this onion and I'm going to slice it this way. I want this nice and small. I'm cutting through, completely through the onion at about 2/3. And then I'm just going to cut this the opposite way from which the onion grows, and that gives me a small dice. This can be wrapped and put in your refrigerator for later, and it's ready to be used. And this part of the onion right here, I'm going to slide this into a cup and then put it right into the pot. So here we go with the onion, and then on the fire with the pan. All right, now while that is beginning to saute, I'm going to add to this some pepper. Now I take a fresh green pepper, I just split the pepper lengthwise, and then I take the pepper again, and I just take the top, the center of this pepper, and I'm going to pop it out. So we're going to give you a close-up on how to clean a pepper. It's already in half. You just take this and just snap that right out. And just pat the pepper gently, and any of the seeds that come out that you don't want can be discarded. And we just take the pepper, small amount that we need, long thin strips cutting from the inside and out. Especially good if the knife is a little dull. And we just take those long thin strips and we just dice them right down. Now I have some nice small bits of green pepper. I'm going to pull them into the cup off the board, and they go right into our pot. And you can hear that that's beginning to cook nicely. Now that gets a quick stir because that's all we need to start this. In go the tomatoes. Some salt and some pepper. And again, we can use the fresh cracked pepper in this if we like. We have also the fresh pepper in there. And now I'm going to take some cold water and some of the cornstarch. I'm going to take that and add the two together. Now the cold water will dissolve this cornstarch. I want to take a look, see how much sauce we have. Okay. And I always stir this with a finger because then I can feel the bottom. On the bottom you'll feel the cornstarch sinks right to the bottom and hasn't dissolved. By stirring it this way, you can feel when all that dust has been dissolved and it's all a liquid. And I have to keep this moving. Takes a little bit of practice. Once I make sure all this is out of here, go around it again. Be sure that it's all gone. And then I'm going to take these and just break these tomatoes a little bit. Stir them just a little bit more, and I'm going to add just a touch to that. And that should tighten that up very nicely. Okay, now I want a little more liquid over top of this. That's no problem. We just add some of the juice that we reserved earlier. Now our tomatoes are all set. I have the cornstarch if I want to thicken this a little bit more, but we're going to watch that as it simmers. And now we're going to prepare the fried fish fillet. The fried fish fillet is a sautéed item that we are going to show you. Now the items that I have are fillets of fish, and I have those here. These happen to be frozen. You can buy fresh, whatever you like. And it's a white meated fish. The white meated fish is usually the best type to use. First of all, there are usually a flat fish, and they can be purchased in fillets like this, frozen. They can also be purchased fresh. I happen to prefer the fresh when they're in season, the frozen when they're not, because they give you that in-season fish that's really not around this time of year. So now we're using flounder, and I'm going to take that and cut that into a portion size. So I'm going to split this one long ways because it's such a long fish. I'm going to take those outside little fin bones off and the tail piece because that's very small. And I'm going to cut these so that I can give 2 on each platter. And that little tip comes off because that will probably burn in the amount of time that it's going to take to cook the rest of that. Now I have them in the flour. I take another shallow pan, and they're going to be dipped into some egg. So I break the egg, and I'm going to mix that up so that we have an egg batter to dip this fish fillets in. You just beat that egg around. With a shallow pan, you don't need a lot of egg, and that's what's nice. With a deeper pan, you have to have so much of the egg in just to get it so that you can lower the fish in it. Now this pan is heating up. The tomatoes are boiling nicely. I'm going to lower them down a little bit so that we don't burn them on the bottom. And I'll give them one quick stir so that we can continue on with our fish uninterrupted. And there we go. Now the fish we take, and I'm going to just flour them on both sides. Make sure that they're coated very nicely. You can see that they're completely white now, covered with the flour. And then into the egg they'll go. So I'm going to dip each one the same as I did the first one, just making sure that they're coated and putting them into that egg. And then we're going to go back down to the saute pan, which by now has reached a nice high temperature. So now I'm going to put the oil in, because that gives me some time to do this. Now the hot pan has the oil added to it, and all I have to do is wait a moment for that oil to heat up. And I'm going to roll that around, and I can see that that's hot. I'm going to flip the fish fillets over so that they're coated, and in they go. And just that quick, they begin to cook. Now, I'm leaving a thumbprint on the top of each one. I can cover that right up when we go in with the last piece of fish. Just want to make sure that we get as much of these coated as we possibly can. There we go. Now anything extra, I'll just pour that right on there and just cover those up so that the fish is completely coated in that egg batter. Now we're going to let that cook for just a minute. I'm going to shake them to make sure that they don't stick. And I'm going to peek underneath to see how quickly they're browning. Taking a look, I'm going to turn the little guy over. He's nice and brown already. I'm going to give that just another minute for the larger pieces to finish cooking. While this is cooking, I'm going to check on these. The stewed tomatoes look very nice. The sauce is thickened just right, so we won't have to add any more cornstarch to this. You can see how nice and thick they look. And we're going to take our baked macaroni and bring that over and see how well that has done in the oven. Because being in the shallow pan, it doesn't need an awful lot of time. So this fish is cooking, and I'm going over to the oven now, and I'm going to take out the baked macaroni, which is already bubbling and browning. So we can turn our oven off, and I can reach right in and pull out our baked macaroni. So there that is already. We'll set that aside. The fish sounds ready to be turned. The edges are brown, so we'll turn that. That can be done two ways, either with a fork, which I'm used to, but until you get the hang of it, use a spatula and flip it away from yourself. Because you are dealing with oil that's at about 350 degrees, and you don't want to have that come back on top of you, so flip it away. It's better to have to clean it up a little bit later on than to have to bandage it up in a hurry. So now they're browning. We're going to give them a moment more to cook. While we're waiting for that, I have a little bit of mayonnaise and relish, and I want to show you a very quick and simple sauce that is very popular with fried fish, whether it be shellfish, oysters, or scallops. I have some mayonnaise here. I'm going to put in a couple spoonfuls of that, and about one, for every two, I put one of the relish in with it, and then we just take that and mix it around. Now a lot of tartar sauce, they use capers, a little Worcestershire, any of that can go in there, whatever you like. So there's our tartar sauce, as simple as that. You don't have to buy the packet or anything else. Tartar sauce is ready. The fish sounds ready. I know that the baked macaroni is ready, so I can shut down all the heat in the kitchen can stop now. And I'm going to pick out some nice fillets. Now just letting them finish all the way through, because the thickness of the fish, we have to give it another minute. And the pan is already hot, and that's going to let that cook all the way through. Now we want to get this To show you how to plate these up, these can be done two different ways. You can either set the plates up or you can bring them out to the table. If you're going to bring these out to the table, a nice idea is to remove the fish after it is done onto an absorbent towel and let them drain. Put them on a cookie sheet and keep them in the oven that we used for the baked macaroni. Just let it wait right in there until service time, and that'll give this a few minutes sitting out of the oven to allow the heat to reduce on it and let those noodles pick up a lot of that sauce that's in there. Two things that you can do then: you can take them out with the stewed tomatoes in their own container and serve them family style, or they can be plated up platter at a time. I'm going to look for a fish here that's almost done. Okay, I want you to take a look into this pan, because whenever you're frying something, something that is going to give you a tip that the fire is too high. See the way these are bubbling now and it's beginning to foam nicely? Okay, that you want to look for. If you ever have a smoke coming out and you're worried about the item that's in the pan, you can do two things to that right away. We can either pull that right off the stove or just shut the fire down. The last thing you want to have to do is to pull these out, because if they're not quite done, you may break that breading. You can see that they're coated very nicely and they take a pinch and a push very well. So I'm going to take that out, and they're going to be put on our platter. I'm turning them over to check for the crispiest and the brownest side, because the side that we show, most of us eat with our eyes, so we have to take that into an account when we're going to feed someone else. The stewed tomato, all I did with the tomatoes was to break them gently, because a diced tomato does look nice, but on a plate, this is going to be more appetizing. Then we can take that little bit of sauce and just pour that right over the top of that tomato with the little bits of onion and the little bits of pepper in it, and it's going to look really nice. Then we take our platter and we move it down here. And I'm going to take a little bit of the baked macaroni now and take that right out onto the plate. Now this can be dished up kind of like a pie. You can cut it like a pie so that everybody gets the top piece that they always are bugging you for if they like the brown part. If not, you can scoop the brown part off for yourself and serve them the underside. And you can see that that has thickened up very nicely. It's a lot thicker than when it went in, and if you were here with us watching very closely, the noodles themselves are a lot larger. So what they did while they were in the oven and that temperature was so high is that it brought the temperature up and it boiled the sauce so that the al dente noodle actually absorbed the rest of the liquid that was in the sauce here. So the tightening effect of the roux, the starch from the pasta that we added, which was the elbow macaroni, along with the drying out in the oven that helped to brown it, it also tightened this up. And just by letting this rest a minute, you can see how nice and thick that is and how it doesn't run. It stands right up, and that's how we want it to stand up on a plate. And then we're going to add, to top it all off, a little bit of our tartar sauce. And that we're going to spoon right over top of our fillets. And this is done right before it is served. So right over the top goes that. And if you're serving your platter, you want to put your platter with the entree or the main part of the platter right facing the guest. So if I was the guest, which I am today, first thing I would do is test the fish out. And I can cut right through this, and it should have this kind of appearance that the breading holds what is inside a nice tender piece of fish. And I'm going to pull a little piece of that out so that you can take a look at that. I'm going to pull a piece of the fish out of the center. You can see that this fish is very light and it flakes apart very nicely. The way fish should be, not overdone. And now to see how well we've done, just the way I like it. So next week, you'll prepare this one while you're watching us on another show. Thanks for watching.